while we speak, Russia continues its military attacks in Ukraine and has conducted hybrid attacks on our member states, including violations of several member states' airspace and sabotage of infrastructure. From day one, we have supported Ukraine's efforts to defend itself and seek peace. And we welcome all diplomatic efforts aimed at achieving just and lasting peace and security. We hope the recent US effort will lead to positive results, and we are pleased with the progress made at the meeting in Geneva. The Council has been clear. We stand united and firm in our support for Ukraine, for its sovereignty and its right to define its own future. Peace must be comprehensive, just and lasting. In view of the ongoing negotiations, I would like to recall the agreed principle for peace as stated by our leaders at the European Council. There can be no negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine. There can be no negotiations that affect European security without Europe's involvement. Ukraine's and Europe's security are connected. Any agreement needs to be accompanied by robust and credible security guarantees that contribute to deterring future Russian aggression. Peace must respect Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Any truce or ceasefire need to be part of the process leading to a comprehensive peace agreement. Our joint approach is achieving peace through strength. This requires Ukraine to be in the strongest possible position, with Ukraine's own robust military and defense capability as an essential component. There cannot be limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that would leave Ukraine open to future attacks. And we are clear on the principle that borders must not be changed by force. President, honourable members, President of the Commission, the EU's role is central to achieve peace in Ukraine. At this crucial time, we must speak with one voice, stay the course and continue our broad and unwavering support to Ukraine. EU foreign ministers are meeting virtually today to discuss the latest developments and to coordinate our actions for a sustainable peace for Ukraine and the European continent. One thing is clear: only pressure on Russia and support to Ukraine will ensure that the Ukrainians can protect their security and freedom. Ukraine's security is Europe's security. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
President Metsola, President Bierre, honourable members. I want to start this debate not in Geneva, but in Ternopil, a city in western Ukraine, closer to the Polish border than it is to Kiev. In the early hours of one morning last week, a storm of Russian drones and missiles rained down. The sheer force of the attacks leading to an inferno erupting. In the burning wreckage laid injured victims and more than 30 dead, innocent men, women and children. Children like Amelka. Amelka, a 7-year-old girl from Poland who was in 2nd grade at the local school. Amelka died in her mother's arms, both of them killed in a mindless and callous act of brutality. On behalf of the Commission, and I'm sure all of us in this House today, I want to start by paying my respect and deepest condolences to all those mourning the victims of Chernobyl and right across Ukraine. Over more than 3.5 years into this war of aggression, this is the daily reality on the ground. And it shows that we can never lose sight of what Ukraine is sacrificing, what Ukraine is fighting for: its security, its freedom, its independence. Because ultimately this is what is at stake in these crucial days for Ukraine and for Europe. Basically the core and the values of the UN Charter. And this is why Europe must keep up the pressure on Russia until there is a just and lasting peace. And I want to be clear from the very outset. Europe will stand with Ukraine and support Ukraine every step of the way. Honourable members, Russia's playbook has not changed. From the start, Russia has always believed that they can outlast Ukraine, Europe and all of its allies. And it is why every time there is serious progress towards negotiations that can bring about a real peace, the violence escalates. We have seen this before. This is a pattern. And the noises from the Kremlin in the last few days say a lot about its real intentions. For them, Ukraine remains a first step in a much bigger game. For Russia, any peace deal is about permanently redrawing maps. It is about returning to great power relations and spheres of influence. But for Ukraine and for Europe, any peace agreement is about creating a just and lasting peace, peace that stops this conflict and does not sow the seeds for new future conflicts. And it is about ensuring a strong and sustainable security architecture for our continent, one that is underpinned by a strong Europe, a strong NATO, a strong transatlantic partnership, and that is what we will defend alongside Ukraine and our allies every step of the way. Honourable members, a just and lasting peace, this is what we all want. And this is why Europe supports all efforts to build that peace for Ukraine, a peace that stops the killing, one that avoids setting a dangerous precedent, one that guarantees Ukraine's security and its sovereign rights in the long term, and that ensures a robust security architecture for Europe. This is why we welcome the efforts led by President Trump. After months of discussions, it is important that the work on an actual text started. Of course, we know that much more effort is needed. But I believe, thanks to the work of Ukraine, the United States, and us Europeans over the last few days in Geneva, we now have a starting point. Our united front, our single voice, and our shared sense of purpose must continue to guide the work at European level. And I would like to outline some of the core principles for Europe as we work with Ukraine, the United States, and the coalition of the willing on the way forward. The first priority is that any agreement should deliver a just and lasting peace. And it should ensure real security for Ukraine and Europe. As a sovereign nation, there can be no limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that would leave the country vulnerable to future attacks. And this is as much about deterrence as it is about Europe's security. because Ukraine's security is Europe's security, so Ukraine needs robust, long-term and credible security guarantees as part of a wider package to dissuade and deter any future attacks from Russia. And it is equally clear that any peace agreement needs to ensure that European security is guaranteed for the long term. The second priority, upholding Ukraine's sovereignty. We know that Russia's mindset has not changed since the days of Yalta, seeing our continent in terms of spheres of influence. So we need to be clear that there cannot be unilateral carving up of a sovereign European nation, and that borders cannot be changed by force. If today we legitimize and formalize the undermining of borders, we open the doors for more wars tomorrow, and we cannot let this happen. Sovereignty also means being able to choose your own future. Ukraine has chosen a European destiny that has already led to partial integration in our single market and our defence industrial base, and this is only the start of a journey. Europe's future is bound to Ukraine's future, and therefore Ukraine's future lies in the European Union. This is not only a matter of destiny, this is a core and essential part of any security guarantee framework, and we will do everything we can to deliver on it together. The third priority, securing Ukraine's financial needs. In the absence of any real intent of Russia to engage in peace talks, it is clear that we need to support Ukraine to defend itself. And that starts by ensuring that they have the necessary financial means. In the last European Council, we committed ourselves to cover the financial needs of Ukraine for the years 2026 and 2027. On this topic, we, the Commission, have presented an options paper. This includes an option on immobilized Russian assets. The next step is now that the Commission is ready to present a legal text. And, honourable members, to be very clear, I cannot see any scenario in which the European taxpayers alone will pay the bill. This is also not acceptable. And another thing must also be clear, that any decision on this needs to be taken in line with the rules of the responsible jurisdiction and will respect European and international law. The fourth priority is, whatever the design of a future peace treaty, it is clear that much of the implementation will come down to the European Union and the NATO partners. Whether it's on security guarantees or on sanctions, financing of Ukraine's reconstruction, the integration in the single market or EU membership, one principle has been accepted. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, nothing about Europe without Europe, nothing about NATO without NATO. And the last priority I would like to focus on is one that cannot be forgotten, and that is the return of each and every Ukrainian child that has been abducted by Russia. There are tens of thousands of boys and girls whose fate is unknown, trapped in Russia by Russia. We will not forget them. There are thousands of mothers and fathers who have never stopped hoping, have never stopped fighting to bring back their children, and Europe will never give up in helping to make that happen. Honourable members, the days ahead are fraught with danger, first and foremost for the people of Ukraine, who continue to face the daily barrage of attacks. Yes, the situation is complex. Yes, the situation is volatile. Yes, the situation is dangerous. But I believe there's also an opportunity here to make real progress. So far, we have seen no signs from Russia of true willingness to end this conflict. So we have to keep up the pressure on Russia. But it is also our duty to engage with any and all efforts that can bring about a just and lasting peace. We know it will not be easy, but we have to find a way to move forward. We have to find a way to stop the killing, to help Ukraine rebuild and reconstruct, to return the children and reunite families. We have to find a way to provide lasting security for Ukraine and for our continent as a whole, and above all, honourable members, to forge a better future as a European future and for Ukraine. Long live Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commission President von der Leyen. And now, on behalf of the political groups, we start with the EPP, its chair, Manfred Weber.
Madam President of the European Parliament, of the European Commission, and first of all, I want to thank you for changing your agenda and being today here with us. Commission President, Council, dear colleagues, 2,000 years ago, Tacitus said, "They make desert and call it peace." That is today Putin's concept. He failed to take Kiev years ago, and since then he has left death and destruction. Hundreds of children have been killed, more than 5 million refugees, war crimes in Bucha. Putin, dear colleagues, is a war criminal, and if a war criminal is not stopped, he will continue. The so-called peace plan was seen as a confirmation of Putin's plan, I have to say. And let me be clear.
encourage them to do that. It's a couple of hours until she emerges from number 11 with her red box, but she will be aware that there is talk in Westminster about the future of her and of Keir Starmer and whether they can go the distance, given that the change they promised at the election has been slow to materialise. They face threats from the left and from the right. She knows this budget has to land well with Labour MPs, with the markets. She's promised no return to austerity but no borrowing spree either, and of course with the public, among whom this government is looking pretty unpopular according to the opinion polls. She says it will be a Labour budget. It will help those with the lowest incomes, so expect the centrepiece to be a rise in the national living wage to £12.71 an hour, putting about £1,000 into the pockets of people on those lowest incomes. And Labour MPs will also likely get something they've been pushing for, which is the lifting of a two-child cap on benefits. Although how will it be paid for is of course the big question, and we're expecting not one big lever to raise £7 or £8 billion, which would have been income tax. They dropped that idea, but a whole array of different tax rises hitting, we expect, people with high value homes, savers, certain people who are saving for their pensions. So there's a question about how it will all go down, and whether it buys the government any time and any goodwill to get through what we know will be a few months ahead. I'm not doing that. I don't know what. If someone else is doing that, give that a go. How is someone else? Is there a U-turn?
That's a number 10 photo.